Buddy, in this first tutorial I want to talk to you about how to install Unity and get started with your first project. And so the first thing I want to do is download the Unity Hub. This is a place where you can download all the different versions of Unity. It's how they do kind of version control and things like that. But it's going to be our main hub for creating the project. So you're just going to go here to press the download button for Windows, Mac, or Linux. Probably most likely it's going to be Mac. You're going to press that and it's going to begin the download process. Once you install it and get that running, it's going to bring you to a screen where it's going to actually ask you to log in to Unity Hub, which means you obviously need a Unity account. And I'm going to go ahead and just sign out of mine so you can see what that looks like. But you're just going to press here, Create Account, and that's going to go through the process of taking you to a new browser window, creating a new Unity ID, and logging in that way. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and press Sign In, and it should bring you back into the Unity app and sign you in that way. And we are signing up for a personal account, so they have corporate accounts, student accounts, and even though you are students, we're going to do the personal account because with the student it does have to connect you to the licensing for that, which we're just going to work with a personal one for now. So we're going to press agree to the personal terms, and once you've logged in here, you're going to see some options here for they've got a whole community, kind of forums and things like that. A lot of learning tutorials and workshops that they let you go through. It's pretty cool. And then we've got our installs. For now, I just want you to have some kind of an install of Unity, and you can go to the install editor to figure out which one you want. I've already installed the 2021 version, and what we're going to be working with Spatial requires a different version than the one we're even going to probably install here. But go ahead and just install Unity in general, probably the 2021 version if you can, and if you can't do that, for now, just do the 2022 version. Right now, I just want to make sure that you have a version of Unity installed. We can always install a new one later. So we're going to press install, and when you do an install of Unity, you're going to want to make sure that this WebGL build support is selected. You can select these other modules if you want to, but you can see how big some of these are, and we're not even going to use them. So we're going to stick with the WebGL build support and press install. And it's going to go through the process of installing both Unity Editor as well as any other components that you've decided to add. So it will take a few minutes for that to load. While that's going on, we're going to click here on Projects, and then from here is where you're going to actually get to create your own Unity scene. And you'll see I've got a folder here already installed. For the next tutorial, I'm going to have the spatial template for you, but today we're just going to get started with the very bare bones, what is Unity Basics 101. So in order to get that going, I'm going to press New Project, and we're going to go down here into the 3D core. There's a lot of different options for building 3D and 2D and MR, AR, VR environments here. The one we're going to work with today is just going to be called 3D Core, and then we're going to go here and give it a new name. You might do something like VR Test Scene or something like that, and then you're going to press Create Project. Once that is done, it will take a few minutes for it to load, and you'll see here in a second what the basic Unity scene will look like. Not much to see just yet. On the left, you're going to see some folders and files and directories that you can access. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And down here, you're going to see more of that in the bottom. On the right, you're going to see an inspector tab, which when you have an item selected in your scene, it's going to give you more options for any item that might be selected. You're also going to see some tabs up here. You've got the main scene where you can place objects in a 360 environment. And then if you tab over to the Game tab, you're going to see some other options for what it might look in an actual camera. And then if you hit this tab, you're going to see what the actual camera is seeing when it's selected. So you can see here when the camera is selected, it's facing in a certain orientation, and you tab over to the game, you'll see more kind of, if you were, first person perspective, what that looks like. So the first thing that is a little bit hard about Unity is kind of navigating around. On your mouse, if you were to choose the View tool, which is the hand tool, you can scrub around your scene once you see that hand tool populate, and you'll see kind of you can move around that way. You can also choose the right click, and you can look around. If you're floating in the air, you can kind of look around that way. Okay, so it's right clicking and left clicking here. So left clicking allows you to use the hand tool and scrub around this way. You can also zoom in using your mouse scroller and zoom in and out. And if you're on a trackpad, just pinch and zoom, and you can do it that way. So that's first thing, is kind of looking around with your right click and then grabbing it with the hand and moving that around. So that's a little bit tricky, but we'll get more used to those controls as we continue. The first thing I want to do is add a plane. Let's just add a floor here because we can't really see anything much until we add that. We're going to go up here to Game Object, 3D Object, Plane. Okay, this is going to create a floor for us. And though you wouldn't think of a plane as being a 3D object, in Unity for now it is. Once you have that plane selected, you'll see you can move it using this move tool. You can move it up in the x-axis, you can move it along, the y-axis, along the x-axis, and then along the z-axis. So we've got all these different dimensions here. You can also see on the right panel, you're going to see how these items are transformed on the position. I can move it along the x-axis, y-axis, or z-axis also over here on the panel. I can also reset those back to 0, 0, and 0, and I can kind of get back to my recenter here if you ever get lost. Another thing you can do is rotate it. You can take this plane, though we wouldn't never really want to rotate it for a floor, but you can rotate any object along the x, y, and z axes as well, and you'll see those at play here. You can also reset those, the rotation, and set that back to 0. And you can also scale it. I can scale the x length. I can scale, not the y because there is no really height on this thing. I'm just going to leave that at 1. And then the z-axis, I can make it longer. So I can build out a whole floor here, 10 units wide by 10 units deep. And now we've got a giant plane here. So that we can see here is listed here on my hierarchy. I'm going to go ahead and rename this. If I double click it, it'll let you zoom in or zoom out on that object. I can rename it though. I'll call it floor, and I'll make just a very basic floor here. And everything's relative in VR, so if you make it 10 by 10, it just matters how big you are in order to see how big that, how wide it will be, and that'll make sense more later. Let's go ahead and add another item here just so we have something to look at. I'm going to go to Game Object and go to 3D Object and go to Cube. Okay, so what that did is it created me a cube right in the middle of my scene. Right now the cube is oriented on the Rotate tool, but I could take the Move tool and move it up, and you'll see there's a shadow being cast on it now, and that's due to our directional light up here. And so I can move that cube back, forth, left, and right. And now if I want to see that in the camera, I could actually click on the camera itself, and you'll see in the preview window that you're going to see that cube right there. Then I can look on my game tab and look at my cube through the tab as well. So I can also not just take the cube and move it around, but I can also take the camera itself and move it around. So I'm going to get to a place where I can see this a little bit better using my hand tool. When I click on my camera, you can see I can move that camera up and down, and you can see in my game window it is kind of moving around, and I can zoom the camera itself towards the cube or away from the cube, and I can move it left and right and things like that. So you can move items around, whether it's the camera or the actual item itself, and then you can obviously use your mouse to move left and right, move all around your scene so far. So there's really not much going on here in the scene yet, but just kind of play around with how to rotate, how to move things around, and things like that. So a few things I want to mention about the items that we just added. We just added a cube. It obviously is going to act like a cube when it's kind of in the world and maybe bumps into something. We want it to act like a cube, and so that is kind of what these items are doing. It's going to have a mesh renderer, mesh collider, mesh filter. Think of that as being kind of like its border. What is the border going to be like? What is the shape of this item? It's a cube. And then down here you've got the box collider. What that does is it's going to kind of create this physics that it will, when it's hit, it won't roll like a sphere might. but it's going to act like a box. It's going to not kind of be able to be pushed over. And so this will kind of make sense as we work with different items as we add them, because let's go ahead and add a cube. I'll go to game object. I'm sorry, not a cube, but a cylinder. Go to cube. I added a cube again. And delete that. And any item, if you add it, you can just press the right click on it and go to delete. I'm going to go to game object, create 3D object, and we'll do a sphere this time. So a sphere in this case will now have a sphere or mesh around it, and it will roll. It could act like an actual ball when it's pushed, and this will make sense here in a second. So if I look in my game view, you can see the two items sitting there, and that's really it for now. So another thing that we want to interact with on these items is something called gravity. We're dealing with the place that when these items are pushed together, they will have gravity and fall when we press the play button here. Because right now, if I were to play this out, and this you can see a play pause and all that up here. If I were to play it, these items are just going to float. They're just going to be sitting there. They're objects in our world that are just going to not really have gravity being applied to it because we haven't added that to it. But when we play out this scene, we have two floating objects. And I'm going to unpress play because I can't edit anything until I'm not in play mode. And a lot of times, if you're in play mode and you're trying to add things to it, it won't let you save it. So make sure if you press play, you can see the camera view and let it kind of render. If you unpress play, you're going to get back to kind of the bird's eye view here. So if we want these items to not just float, but fall when we press play, we can add a component, and there's lots of different components you can add to these items. And I'm going to press add component, and the one I'm going to add is in the physics tab, and it's going to be called rigid body. And this allows us to give it a mass. We can add drag so it maybe falls a little slower. But mostly we're going to let it use gravity. And so I'm applying this just to the sphere right now because the sphere was selected. I added that component. Now when I press play, you're going to see the sphere fall to the ground, but the cube will stay floating. And this is a way to see the difference between, see, the cube or the sphere fell to the ground. So I could add that same component to the cube. I'm just going to press add component. I'm going to go to the physics tab, and I'm going to go to the rigid body, and now I'm going to make my, let's go ahead and make the cube come up higher, but it's going to have a bit of a drag. So I'll do, let's say, it goes from 0 to infinity. We'll do a drag of 20 and see what that does. Go ahead and press play. So right now the sphere should fall straight away, and then the cube should go slower. You can see, yep, the cube is falling slowly at a rate of 20. So, these items are now interacting with each other. I could also take this ball and move it on top of the box. And if I pull them kind of near each other, we'll see if they'll collide. And that's what that mesh, the colliders do, is they allow you to have borders so they hit each other, and then you can see what happened. It kind of hit that cube, and now it's all acting like, physics. Okay. So another thing, you can play around with the different components that they have by default. You've got cylinders, spheres, planes, things that you might want to add. You might want to add a wall, and in order to add an actual wall, you just add a cube, but then you just make it super long. And I can take the scale of the x-axis and just make it real long. I can make it real tall as well. Or let's see, the y-axis, make it like a tall. And I can start creating some walls and things like that and kind of drag them that way to make, a room or whatever I want to do. Another thing I want to show you is something called a material. Now, right now we've just got these objects, but to add like a skin on top of it, you would create something called a material. So I can right-click here in my assets folder, and I can press create, and then I'll go down here to material. And once that material is created, I'm going to select this albedo tab, and what that does is it lets me choose an actual color for this material. So you get a color wheel. You can make it make a choice there. You can also decide if you want this thing to be metallic. You can see a preview of it down here in the bottom, and you'll see that that ball is going to be more shiny or less shiny. You can add smoothness and things like that, make it really look like a bowling ball, and things like that. Once you've got your material created, you can then take that and drag it on top of the item that you want it to apply to, and there you have it. You can apply that same material to any item that you might see. You can also create new materials like this one that's blue, red, and whatever else you might need. Now, beyond just the basic game objects that you're given here in the 3D objects, spheres, capsules, and you also have trees and basic things like that, you also have effects that you could add. We're not going to do a whole lot with some of these other ones, but you also have access to this thing called the Asset Store, which if you can't see it here in the tab, you can go to Window and go to Asset Store. What this is going to do is going to open a new browser window for you, and it will bring up this web-based Asset Store. If you need to be logged in to Unity, and what you can do from there is you can just search, if you want to do free animals, and you can search from any number of free or paid for assets that might be out there. And you can also search by price and just choose the free ones. You can also choose all kinds of other items other than animals, but if I wanted this animals pack, I could just click on here, and it should say add to assets, although I've already done this, so it'll now say open in Unity. What that's going to do is going to open it in Unity where you can download it and import it into your scene. So you should bring you onto this package manager where you're going to see animals free, low poly. You're going to see lots of other ones that I've downloaded in the past. Everything from a food truck to castle stuff. And then we're going to download it. And then once it's downloaded, we got to import it. Okay, it's going to take all these different assets. FBX is pretty much a standard for any kind of 3D model. And we're going to go ahead and press import. And what that's going to do is going to bring it into your particular item, your scene. So I'm going to go here. Now I'm going to tab back to my scene. And I'm going to go here into the animals free. And you're going to get lots of different folders and directories whenever you download an asset. Many times you'll see a materials folder. It works similarly to what we just did. It will add different materials to your objects. These meshes are going to be kind of the structure, of the item. But what you're going to really end up with are these prefabs. Every time that you download a new asset, the prefabs folder is going to have basically everything built into it. So it'll be the mesh and the material and everything with it. So I'm going to take this chicken and just drag it into my scene. I can then take that chicken and scale it up. I can use that scale tool. I can move it up. I can rotate it. I can move it wherever I want to and just kind of place it there. There are other assets that you might want. And you can kind of play with that as soon as you place things where you want. I'm going to actually go back to the thing here. One I like to play with is this character free. I usually type him in, and you get this Super Cyan. It's called character pack free sample Super Cyan. That's usually what I like to use as my first test. That you can kind of see how it works. You can add it to your assets and then open it in Unity. Now I've already downloaded it, and you'll see it here in my package manager. And so it's this free sample. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to download it, and then once it downloads, I'm going to import it, and this takes it into my scene. I'm going to press import again, and once again, it's going to put that folder here down in my assets directory. And once it's in there, you're going to see a very similar hierarchy where you're going to see all the similar folders of materials and meshes and prefabs. And again, I'm going to go into the prefabs folder, and in that prefabs folder will be some models that we can put in there. But as you can see, all the different ones I've downloaded over the years, there's a lot out there, and you can just keep doing some more searches till you find one you like. But here's a Super Cyan character. I'm going to go to my prefabs folder, and there's a few different ones. The base does not have any animation with it. It's just going to be a guy standing there. And then you have the simple movement one. The simple movement, I will go high quality, is going to be, I'll have some animation associated with it. So I'm going to grab this, pull him in here, set him down right there, and then I'm going to rescale him, make him a little bit taller. I can bring my arrow tab and bring him up to the equator here. I can rotate him. just to get started. And I'll look in my game view, and that's kind of what I'm seeing here. Once I press play, you should see everything kind of render, and I should be able to use my D-pad to actually let this guy run around and use the spacebar to jump and move, and now I've got a whole little scene here with it. He's running through the chicken. Because that chicken doesn't have a mesh, a collider associated with it, it's not going to, you're just going to run right through him. And so and that's kind of how those colliders work. This chicken doesn't have, it's transparent at the moment. But what I could do is I could add a component to it. I could add a collider, and you do the best you can with it. Make it act like a box. So it's going to put this box all around it. You can change the scale of that collider, and if I choose the link button, it's going to let me, it's going to auto sync, but you'll see here I can decide how big or small that is. But the box collider is actually what I wanted to affect here. Make that box a little bit smaller, make it fit him a little bit better, and get that frame around him. So yeah, and so that's kind of it. I just want you to kind of experiment with different layers, different assets, maybe bring a few in, press the play button, see if you can get things working. And this is just going to be basic kind of get to know Unity 101.